Everyone, welcome to ThinkNeuro's alumni panel for spring 2026. Today we're going to be featuring the stories of four ThinkNeuro alumni, including Thu, Millie, Eldana, and Antonio. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves really quickly?
Yeah, I can go first. My name is Thu Shan, and I am currently a freshman studying mechanical engineering at Stanford University.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Aldana. I'm currently a high school senior at university and University High School Charter, and I'm an incoming freshman at Columbia University.
Hello guys, I'm Antonio. I'm a senior at Issaquah High School located in Washington State. I'm an incoming freshman at Cornell University.
Hi everyone, my name is Millie Subianto. I'm a current high school senior at Birmingham High School in Los Angeles, and I'm an incoming freshman at Yale University.
Nice. So now we're going to start with Thu. Can you tell us what you did at ThinkNeuro during your time here?
Yeah, so I first joined ThinkNeuro in summer of 2023 as a bibliometrics intern. And my main role, I was working with like a team, but my main role was to analyze scientific literature and research trends, especially related to neurodegenerative diseases. I would use R for data analysis, which helped me develop real technical skills that go beyond what we normally learn in school. And through this work, I learned how to work with large data sets, interpret scientific research, and also draw meaningful conclusions from data. This wasn't just about like looking at data, it was also about understanding how research informs real-world medical and social issues. And this was like particularly like related to like public health and just it gave us like a good idea of like what was already existing in current research. And then in fall of 2024, I continued with Think Neuro as part of their opioid education outreach and content team. And in this role, I was also working as part of a team, and I focused on web-based research, creating educational pamphlets, and translating complex topics into accessible information for the public, especially for San Bernardino, like the county. And this experience showed me how science can be used for community education and also social impact, especially when it comes to like public health issues like opioid misuse. Some opportunities that Think Euro helped me get. I remember when I was applying to like a bunch of different summer programs, I applied using like my experiences at Think Euro, and I applied to like SSP, Simmer, MITES. I ended up getting into Simmer and MITES, not MITES, Simmer and SSP. And Simmer is like the Stanford Institutes of Medicine Summer Research Program. And when I applied, I used my Think Euro experience to show my interest in just like the sciences, like public health, my commitment to research because I already done some research, and my ability to work with real data. Because I already had research experience, I could confidently explain why I wanted to pursue science at a higher level. Another opportunity that it helped me get was experiences in research at Berkeley Lab, and I did this past summer actually. And here I highlighted my data analysis skills, especially my work with R and scientific data sets. And Think Neuro gave me concrete examples to talk about instead of just saying I like research. And finally, I also used my Think Hero work as like a central theme in my Common App application because I use it to show like my passion in research, my interest in like public health, and my commitment to social justice. And this was a big theme in my essays, my just like my application as a whole. Rather than just like listing achievements, I was able to tell a story about how research was meaningful to me and show real world impact. Some general college tips is that I think one of the biggest mistakes that students make is like treating their activities and activities lists and essays just like a resume. Instead, you want to like list the qualities that you want to highlight and make sure that your essay can be summarized into those qualities so that because your admissions counselors, they're all like admissions officers that are like basically skimming your essays, and you want to make sure that they can understand like the gist or like the story you're trying to tell them in just like one sentence. Like they can tell just by like reading it. And I use my Think Neuro experiences to show like my growth, purpose, and values. Also, you want to treat each essay as like a mini YS, even if it's not explicitly asking. What I did is I would instead of like instead of just writing about random experiences, I chose stories that reinforced the same message. So if I like wrote about research, I would connect it to like the school's labs, professors, research programs. If I wrote about like social justice, I would connect it to community engagement programs, public health initiatives, student organizations. But this means that you have to do thorough research into your colleges. Like this showed colleges that I wasn't just like applying anywhere. I actually just I cared about their campus. Like, because colleges want to see students who fit their values, will use their resources, and will contribute to their community, and your essays should make that clear. I would spend like maybe a solid day just like researching one college and like looking at like niche clubs, niche organizations, stuff that you can't really see from like one Google search. Because that way it like helps the admissions counselors just like be able to visualize you on their campus. And if they're this is also like a tip people use in like interviews, like make sure that they can like see you on their campus or like working in that job.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you so much, Thu. If you have any questions for her, you can leave them in the chat and also on the Slack as well. Our team and also alumni are going to be going over the questions on Slack for 1 hour after the panel is over. But now let's move on to Eldana.
Okay, hi again. So first of all, my Think Neuro experience, I've done quite a number of internships. The first internship that I did was on multiple sclerosis. So I found out about Think Neuro, I feel like when I was like scrolling through Instagram stories and it came up as like the advertisement. And at that time, I was like, I think I was a sophomore and I was like really I knew I wanted to get into research, but since like both like my family and my parents don't really know much about it and like there's not much opportunities at my school since like it's a Title I school and stuff like that. I was like looking for opportunities and I guess like Instagram somehow heard like all of the conversations I've been having and it suggested it and then I ended up applying. I got in. I was super happy. I ended up becoming a co-associate for that one. I remember we partnered with Kaiser for that study and essentially what we were doing was finding out if there's a difference that between like the existence of gray matter of individuals that are like old and young and then like comparing that with those without MS and then those with MS. So we did that study. It was great. I ended up being co-associate and also the second author for that. And I still talk to the first author because like we ended up being really close. She goes to CU Boulder and like yeah, she really helped me throughout the college application process and I really love her. So that was amazing. And then that same spring semester, I also took on the outreach internship. So the basic like job that I had for that, I reached out to like around 75 schools. So like sending emails to either the secretaries or the principals across like 3 districts and basically telling them about Think Neuro's like summer clinical internship and like targeting upperclassmen who might be like interested in clinical research, so, like kind of similar to me sophomore year, like looking for that research opportunity. So I drafted those personalized emails and I got a lot of emails that were unanswered. Honestly, like a majority of them, they just ghosted me. But the ones that did, I had a couple meaningful conversations. Like we went back and forth, had a couple meaningful conversations, and they ended up like promoting it within their schools, either like on their Schoology page or like, whatever platform that they usually use to communicate. And yeah, that also like taught me a lot. I feel like because like cold emailing is a big thing that like both like high schoolers and college students do to like get research internships either from professors or like, like actual research scientists. And so that was like a meaningful experience for me because it was like I don't think I've sent like a mass email amount like that before. And oftentimes when you do cold emails, like you have to send a large amount of emails because like not every professor has like a spot in their lab, etc. Okay, and then summer 2024, I did another bibliometrics internship, and this one was focused on computed tomography and neuroimaging. So our research question was basically about like whether MRIs and like PET and CTs and stuff like that enhance early detection and characterization of brain tumors and cancer. I was also co-associate in that one. We used Web of Science. I learned R. Obviously, ThinkNeuro has. I know you guys haven't started yet, I believe, but they have like a lot of like information about like R and like learning about that. And it was the second time I was exposed to it, but I feel like that second time was really when it like solidified in my head. And I was like, okay, I'm pretty confident that like I could teach another person this, or like I can I truly knew like how to use R and like how to use the Web of Science. So yeah, I was really happy. Thinking has given me like ooh, a lot of resources. I also presented the research poster, so that was the second symposium that I did. Um, and then I came back fall 2024, and spring 2025, and I was working on the health advocacy internship project, and basically it was about developing a digital intervention platform for opioid addiction recovery. It was also quite personal to me because I've lost a friend to opioid in middle school, and so that was a really cool experience. Yeah, so that's my experience with Think Neuro. It's kind of a lot, but it was all worth it. Okay, next is opportunities that Think Neuro helped me to get. There's besides the ones that I mentioned earlier about like, learning how to like, learning how to like write cold emails and stuff like that and like learning R. I got to apply to a lot of summer programs similar to like the previous panelist was talking about. I applied to quite a number of them. I did MITES obviously. I also applied to CMU SAMS, SSP. I got into a number of them, but I ended up choosing MITES. It had like a pretty low acceptance rate, but to be honest, I was waitlisted at first, and there's like 165 like 165 kids that were waitlisted, and then they chose one person to get out of that waitlist, and I sent a follow-up with like a bunch of like internship like and like things that I did. So like that follow-up email like actually really helped me because it was a pretty long email. I was scared to send it, and I sent it like a week before they said that like official waitlist decisions were going to come out. So yeah, that was pretty cool. I got accepted off of the waitlist from 165 people, and I think like around 6,000 or a little above that applied. For those of you who don't know what MITES is, it's basically a 6-week summer program at MIT, and you get to take like 5 classes. 4 of them are STEM related. One is like humanities related, and then one of them is like a project course where you work on like a research project of your choice. So I did something related to like neuroscience and biomedical engineering. So like thinking was kind of like the start of my neuroscience like exposure, and I kind of like branched out with mites. Another thing, like an opportunity that I got to have, I was in AP research in 11th grade, and for that, for those of you who have like taken it, you have to like have like an expert advisor. And so I talked to my teacher and I convinced her to let me like cold email a bunch of people to like work in their lab for my AP research project instead of just doing like surveys for high school students. And I ended up getting it at the UCLA Sand Lab, and I applied all of the R and programming and like the skills that I got from Think Neuro to design a study. It was a cross species study for like rats and students. Basically studying like does like isolation like how does isolation appear in these two like species and like what's the differences and stuff like that. It was really cool. I got to do that. I got a file in AP research, so it worked out. Next opportunities, college applications. I ranked Think Neuro third on my Common App. You can see like the activity description right there. I was research associate intern, Think Neuro research internship, led interns. There's about like 10 to 11 people in each cohort. So that was the description that I had. There's 3 symposiums that I did. And then the last internship that I did was about like the overdose device and app. So I did that description. And yeah, I think it really helped me because like I was a STEM applicant. I was a biomedical engineering and neuroscience major. So I think it all like aligned pretty well. Like the UCLA Sand Lab, might like it had like a pretty coherent theme, if that makes sense. Okay, moving on to general college application tips. One of my biggest like pieces of advice is to quantify all of the achievements that you have. Like I know all of you guys do like a bunch of amazing things in your own communities and schools. And so whenever you include like numbers and awards for all of the like extracurricular activities that you've done, I feel like it gives the AOs a better perspective of like what is your position as a student when compared to like your peers. And so whenever you can like quantify like on everything, I feel like awards is maybe like I know people know to quantify on like activities because like like it's kind of obvious, but for awards a lot of people like end up just putting the title of the award and not like how many people applied or like like certain things like that, or like how many people at your school oftentimes get this, like even general amounts. Like I was like emailing to people to like find out for like the programs or like the awards that like didn't give a number at first. So yeah, I highly suggest to do that. My second piece of advice is the thing that I was mentioning earlier, having a central theme. So connecting your Common App essay to the rest of your application. For example, the number one extracurricular that I put on Common App was working at a teen suicide hotline. And then my personal statement was kind of about like a lot of different things. I started like talking about like it was the basically the prompt that asked about who are you the most grateful for? And or who do you have the most gratitude for? And I talked about my teacher, my third grade teacher, and how like he gave me like a journal. Like he taught me how to write because I was an ESL student because I moved here from Ethiopia when I was 5. And so like I didn't really know English and I also had like a really bad speech impediment. And so he taught me that and he also gave me that journal. And I moved back to Ethiopia for middle school. And so like he it was like a consistent mentor throughout my life. So I showed my gratitude to him. And then like there's things that happened during middle school, like I mentioned earlier, with like the opioid overdose death of one of my closest friends. So I talked about like my reasoning for joining the teen suicide hotline was connected to that. And then I reflected that inside of my activities list because like that was my number one thing. And then I explained why I'm interested in like neuroscience and biomedical engineering because biomedical engineering, like the opioid device and like other things like that connect to that. And then neuroscience to understand why like adversity and other things lead people to suicide or like lead people to other things. And just like mental health advocacy and like politics was also a big like thing in my application. So I just made like sure like all of the things just like aligned. And I feel like a lot of like really good applications that I read before applying and also that I've read afterwards of like friends that I've made along the way along like the college application process have had a central theme. Like I can look at them and be like, yeah, this is what like this student is about. And so like doing Think Neuro and then doing some other like neuroscience related.
I'm not sure what happened. I think her Wi-Fi went out. Um, let me check really quick. Yeah, I think her Wi-Fi. That's not good. Um, but the good thing is she did leave her email here for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to just take a picture of it and send her an email. Let's hope she rejoins in a few minutes. In the meantime, let's move on to Millie.
Hi again, everyone. My name is Millie. Okay, first to start off, what I did at Think Neuro was I completed their fall bibliometrics research internship. And I was a part of the neuropharmacology and drug discovery cohort. And my team focused on analyzing the impact of drugs on waste clearance, such as tau and alpha-synuclein in the brain. And prior to Think Neuro, I had no idea what even our programming language was. And I was really grateful to have this experience to be able to further my skills in this language because you later on see that I was able to apply it to different sectors in my life as well. But I really worked with my teammates to gain more expertise in this language and also Think Neuro offers like a lot of video resources, um, which you'll probably later see, to really help you, especially if maybe you have like no coding experience before joining Think Neuro. And I was also able to have more experience in furthering my skills in Excel. And again, just to conduct my research with my teammates. And it was really cool for like my teammates to kind of collaborate and kind of, understand what this language was. But you're gonna get a lot of help and they answer your questions really fast. So again, really thankful to have gained these skills. And overall, throughout the internship, I just collaborated with my teammates to develop a research poster and abstract. Um, and one of my specific responsibilities was creating the figures and the discussion portion of our findings to present. And I was also responsible for, I guess, identifying a lot of the limitations about the specific drugs that we identified, such as DFO or engineered nanoparticles in our research.
Yeah.
Really cool. And I was also recognized as a top intern for one of the top interns for our neuropharmacology and drug discovery cohort. Um, and it was mostly because of, I guess, my commitment and my willingness to kind of collaborate with my teammates. I think one of the best parts of Think Neuro is definitely like being able to collaborate with the people in your cohort because it was one of my first times actually working with graduate level students, which is something that I find super, super cool. And even though, we were coming from different parts of the nation and had different backgrounds and contexts, it was really cool to kind of see us all come together and connect with like our passion and love for neuroscience. And I think that's something that's really cool about Think Neuro is kind of like, maybe you're forced initially to like this group of strangers you don't even know, but as you're like working through your internship and the whole process, you're gonna become a lot closer to them. And I think it's really cool. That's like a really cool component of Think Neuro. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna circle back to Eldana for just like 30 more seconds before we move on. Sorry about that, because she just rejoined.
Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm gonna finish really quick. So the last college application tip that I have is utilizing fly-in programs. I applied to like a couple, like not a couple, I applied to 13 fly-in programs, and I feel like the friends that I made through there, and also like you get like college hosts at these fly-in programs, and they usually like know a lot and like want to help like high school students a lot. So gaining essay feedback from your dorm hosts or your mentors that you learn through there, and also just making a lot of really great friends across the country and visiting the schools that you're applying to, you're able like something that the first panelist said was like saying niche things, like mentioning niche clubs. Fine programs are like so good to find out niche things about the school because you're actually there and you're like learning so much about the school. So yeah, I really recommend applying to those. And also like if you're gonna ask for feedback, then ask like an English history teacher, those like older people or college counselors instead of relying on peer feedback because I've learned like I've heard a lot of like horror stories with like getting peer feedback about like stealing essays and like a lot of other things like that. So highly recommend like getting those people like kind of like more not professional but like kind of professional help. And yeah, that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go back to Millie now.
Okay, and some next for some opportunities that ThinkNeuro helped me get. So prior to joining the internship, I was a part of the Stanford Neuroscience Journal Club, which is one of Stanford's outreach programs. And I've been in this club since I think the end of my sophomore year or the beginning. But I was always wanting to become more involved in the program and specifically reached out to one of the directors of the program, who's also the head of neurosurgery at Stanford, because she was super cool and I was really inspired by her, Dr. Odette Harris. And so I basically wanted to reach out. And when I was initially reaching out, I mentioned my Think Neuro experience to kind of show like the passion I had for research, specifically neuroscience research, and how I really wanted to devote like a lot of my time in the future to, I guess, bridging the gaps in research and also like being able to answer some unidentified things that were already out there. And so I think mentioning that really helped me be able to get that interview with the director of the program because it kind of gave me like some credibility and kind of showed like, I already had experience doing neuroscience research. And so that was really helpful. And I was eventually able to, have a deep conversation with her where I continued to actually talk more about what I was doing at Think Neuro and like the people I was working with and like what my findings were. And she gave me a lot of helpful advice on kind of like what pursuing neuroscience research looks like for other women in STEM and gave me a lot of inspiration and helpful advice. So that was super cool. And I've also used the skills that Think Neuro has given me, such as the R programming language, to basically further my current extracurriculars and involvement. So, starting the end of my sophomore year, I had conducted my own independent research on health literacy among adolescent immigrants. And I basically gathered like some people from my school who were adolescent immigrants, and conducted a few focus groups and done a thematic analysis to get my findings and eventually write a paper on it. And I had the opportunity to present these findings at a conference earlier this month or earlier last month. And me and this professor have been working closely to think about publishing my paper. But something that we kind of noticed was I wanted to work a lot more on the literature review that I already had. And if you guys are not aware, that's basically like the introduction section of your research paper, kind of explaining what the gap in research is, what you want to research, the importance of the topic, and just introducing it. And thanks to Think Neuro, I have used the R programming language to basically identify more articles I wanted to include, and again develop like kind of more themes that I wanted to show in the introduction section of my paper. And so now I believe that it's like more solidified to later publish to academic articles in the future, which is super cool. And of course, I use Think Neuro for my college applications. Something that I think was super important was I did apply Yale Early Action and I spoke about my involvement in Think Neuro during my interview. So you guys will see this later on when you have college interviews is I think one of the first things they're going to ask you is probably like, why are you interested in your major? Or like, why did you apply to these majors in your application? And I applied neuroscience as like one of my interests in my Yale application. And when I was asked that, the first thing I talked about was Think Neuro and kind of like how I was working with my team to and in the findings, everything about my internship. It gave me something really good to talk about, and my interviewer and I really bonded over that. But I think something that I really want to share is during my Think Neuro internship involvement, there were some times where like maybe my group maybe like had a challenge or a problem with our research, but what I really liked was how we were all able to kind of come together, and kind of fix it or like really work together. And that was like an anecdote I shared with my interviewer. And I think that honestly was something that really helped me out a lot because one of the main values of Yale is community and collaboration. So I think that was like a good experience to share. So through Think Neuro, not only do you get like research experience, but you also get like experience of your community and like working with others, which is something that you can really talk about in interviewers and just later on in life. And Think Neuro was, of course, also an activity on my Common App, as you can see, and my UC or University of California activity list. And I also talked about my team's research like more in detail in one of my UC PIQs or essays when I was talking more about kind of why I was interested in neuroscience. So some general college application tips I have is to develop or plan out a narrative flow for your entire application. So what's a narrative flow? Basically, I think a few of the alumni have already talked about it, but it's kind of like the theme or the story and message that you want to share in your application. So around 3 weeks before I submitted my application, and when I already had like an initial draft of my Common App, I basically went through each section of my application and thought about what's the story or message that I'm kind of showing through each section. So this goes from like your grades, your extracurriculars, your letters of recommendation, interviews, everything that your admissions officer is looking at when reviewing your application. And going through each section, I basically wrote around 2 to 3 sentences about what I thought my admissions officer would think about me or get away from like that section specifically. And from there, I like went through it, like all the sentences I wrote and kind of saw how well it flowed or like what components I felt like I wanted to work on more. So like for example, I really wanted to emphasize community because I knew that was like one of the college's main values. And I noticed like, maybe my essays weren't really showing that a lot. So I knew like that was a specific section that I wanted to work on a little bit more. And I think something that connects with this is I also advise you guys to take a values quiz before planning your personal statement. So a values quiz is basically any quiz like you can find online, just you can look it up. But it basically helps you identify like your top 3 to 5 main values. And I think this is just really helpful before like even starting your Common App or college application process in general, because I think it's really easy for us to maybe like compare ourselves to other people or look at people with all these amazing stats or extracurriculars online that we kind of like maybe want to fabricate ourselves or not really remain authentic in our application. So I think it's really important that you kind of remember your values and not only like just like remember it in your head throughout the process, but also kind of show it in your application, especially like your personal statement. So for example, after taking a values quiz, I learned that like my top 2 main values were community and health. And I really wanted to emphasize that in my personal statement. And I think that really helped me also kind of just, remember who I am, remember like what I value, and just remain authentic and true to myself in my application. And lastly, this is something I like to say to all of my junior friends who are like freaking out over college applications already, is that better is the enemy of good. Or in other words, don't strain your abilities to reach perfection. I think oftentimes we look at something that's already good and we just try to make it so much better, better, better. And we realize, or we don't realize that we're actually like hurting it in the process, if that makes sense. And I think that's because you want to try to reach perfection. But just remember, there's no such thing as a perfect application. Again, as long as you're authentic, true to yourself, that's what matters. So rather than trying to make something that's good, like an essay, already like make it better, try to focus on like other things in your application that you think could actually use some work. And so yeah, thank you so much.
All right,
Okay,
thank you so much, Millie. Let's move on to Antonio now.
hi guys. My name is Antonio. I got accepted into Cornell University under early decision plan this upcoming year. I'm planning to major in biological sciences with a focus on neuroscience, hopefully minoring in mathematics. And I'm here to introduce some tips for you guys as well as what I did at ThinkNeuro. So I was accepted as a bibliometric research internship for last summer, so that was 2025. And during that process, I learned R programming, which is an introductory statistics skills that I learned for neuroscience research. So the skills I learned through R programming classes were very useful for reviewing papers and for information review paper is like a great introductory step for conducting a personal research. And I had previously done a individual research on my mental health policies in my state. But right now, thinking of like my past experiences, if I could have taken the bibliometry research classes by Think Neuro like before I conducted that research, my individual research could be better. But anyways, I'm just saying that the R programming I learned was very useful skill that has much potential to be used in later researches. Anyway, going back to my summer experience, I collaborated as a group to lead a research on the early life risk of ADHD and ASD. So we basically analyzed the interactions of early life environmental exposures and genetic expression on those specific neurodevelopmental disorders. Our group was focused on neurodevelopmental disorder, and we chose ADHD and ASD as major disorders that we were trying to analyze. And we reviewed a lot of review papers through our programming, identifying research trends, what are popular, what researchers are thinking on the field. And we were able to conclude a specific like statistical value about like how the proportion of researchers that focus on the genetic expression or environmental exposures, because the disorders I mentioned are very epigenetic, which means that both ways are working together um, to cause those disorders. Finally, as a group, I drafted introduction page for the research poster, and using the R programming skills, I created appropriate visuals, which was included in the posters, and we were able to present the research on the conference, the Think Neuro conference, which was a great experience. The opportunities that I think Neuro helped me to get, to begin with, I mentioned how it was a group project and I conducted at Think Neuro. So when I first joined Think Neuro, I was hoping to kind of like focus on adolescent bipolar disorder because those parts where I was focused on as my personal passion. However, my group, like I said, decided on ADHD and ASD. So it motivated me to research further on my original passion, which was adolescent bipolar disorder. So I conducted personal research on the same summer, focusing on the adolescent bipolar disorder. But the skills I used for that personal research was skills that I learned in Think Neuro. So it was great to have like those two researches going on the same summer because I was focusing on different kind of mental health disorders, but I was able to pursue all my passions I have for adolescent mental health. Um, I sorry. Also, you could have noticed in my activities list, but that research I conducted, I was able to get a like not a sponsorship, but like a co-authorship title for Dr. Rosenberg, who is like a certified um university level like a doctor, which I got connected through emailing. I feel like emailing was a common thing that was brought up today, but um having those like my experiences as having experiences in Think Neuro and like mentioning them in my emails to different professors and doctors were very important in getting that co-authorship because a lot of publication websites or publication programs want the co-authorship and like a advisorship from the professionals. And Dr. Rosenberg was one of the doctors that I could have connected, and she gave me a lot of like comments and reviews on my personal research, which definitely like solidify my research. Secondly, through the experiences at Think Neuro, I could have gotten my regional STEM award, which is not quite regional because it's called like Rotary Club award, and Rotary Club is like popular through nationwide. They usually like select students from schools based on the subject who are doing an excellent job on like community engagement using their academic knowledge. And I mentioned my Think Neuro experience because um, the research I did as a group really connected to my personal passion of adolescent mental health, and my advocacy for laws that advocates for the adolescent mental health. So the Rotary Club recognized that, and I got award, and they said the scholarship opportunities will be much more available in the later semester, which I'm looking forward to. Lastly, I was also recognized as top intern during the summer research internship. Basically, there's a like one leader who is usually undergraduate undergraduate student of college. Um, but I was also recognized as top intern because I was leading a small group assigned for reviewing articles. And it was great experience to like collaborate with others and building like communication skills, etc. Next slide, please. All right, the last general tips I have for college application. The first is being yourself. So I like to think college application process as a journey of discovering your identity. There will be a lot of information out there online, but don't like try to be overwhelmed by that or like devalue yourself because of that. For example, one key thing I want to mention is like don't choose majors that you think it'll have more acceptances. Um, Not only like top schools accept by they don't accept by major, you have to craft personal essay about the major itself. For example, Cornell University has a dedicated 650 essay about why us plus why major. So you have to really think through why you're passionate about specific fields of study. For me, it was like kind of tricky because I changed my major direction during junior year. I originally wanted to pursue mathematics because I was really passionate about competing in math. But as I take more like college advanced courses, I realized that what I like to do, like my pure mathematical passions was far from what colleges teach me. So I changed my direction to neuroscience, which was a passion I embarked after taking AP psychology. However, my experiences was lacking, and I was like not sure if I could like draft a lot of experiences about neuroscience in that college essay, in that Cornell essay, sorry. But also, Cornell didn't have a neuroscience major, only biological sciences major, then concentration on the neuroscience. Still, I focused on my passion that I built on ThinkNeuro, which was a great like ingredient for my YS essay, which was specific enough to like connect to my future, like what I want to gain from Cornell University's major, and then how can I apply to in the future. I think that's important to put that. And then secondly, stay positive. Like I said, the online like sources will tell you about a lot of information about the acceptance rates, how many people in your school go to like specific school, and like average academic statistics or top academic statistics of that specific college. But those like looking at those can be overwhelming. I can speak from myself because I have my experience like scrolling through Reddits and especially when the deadlines are approaching, it is easily to get overwhelmed. But because colleges review your application holistically, I think it is more important to craft your application as a whole, focusing on the central theme that a lot of like our alumni mentioned. Lastly, being early in deadlines, I like to like emphasize the letter of recommendations. They, even though people like some people say they just don't add anything to your application, I think those are really important if you have like great connection with that recommender. Definitely ask them by end of the junior year, if not like end of the summer of junior year, so that they have time over the summer and like really think about about their relationship with yourself. And then scholarships. Some colleges like University of Southern California have like different scholarship dates, so getting early on those would be helpful for you. Lastly, on supplementals, I feel like the more time you spend on supplementers, better the quality gets. Um, Cornell specifically has 8 undergraduate colleges, and each college looks for different type of students, and each college have different majors. For example, I was accepted under Arts and Science College, but Agricultural Life Sciences has the same major as Arts and Science, which is biology, but they focus more on human or industrial or like agricultural aspect. But I was seeking to focus more on the human and like anatomical side. So really spending much time on like researching those differences are really important. That's it.
That's it. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much for giving an overview of your experiences with ThinkNeuro and also the general college tips. Now we're going to move to Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave it in the chat. Even better, if you unmute yourself and ask, we can answer right away live as well. So yeah. Okay, so I think we'll read off the chat because people are shy today. So I think the first question I see is, Can any of the alumni please give an example of how the bibliometric pathway helped you frame a research question and come up with a project? I think a few of you guys did an independent project or under a professor or like a program after ThinkNeuro. So could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can maybe touch on this question. I think like the bibliometric pathway, there's a lot of like beforehand identifying the gap in whatever research you're trying to do is like probably the most important part in my opinion. And so when you're identifying the gap, most of what you're doing is making like doing bibliometrics. Like you're going through like all of the like articles, reading those articles or just their abstracts and like finding out what the gap in that field is and then like how you can address that gap with a new study. So bibliometrics, it like encompasses all of those articles. And then like if you want to go outside of that and do your own independent study, you have to find out what gap you want to address and how you're going to contribute to like that scientific community. And so when I like how I use the bibliometric pathways, like the skills that I learned of like parsing through like all of the different articles and like, using R and like all of the skills that you do learn during the internship, like I used those to identify the gap. And then after that, it was mostly like training courses and other things that I took that helped me like come up with like my specific question. Like when you're reading the articles, you clearly see what the gap is, and then you find out how you're gonna address it through working with like an expert advisor or like a mentor, etc. Because it's pretty hard to do because it's like some of the things that like some independent projects are like graduate level, and so it's like you really need to like rely on those people that are like kind of helping you. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Nice, thank you. The next question, oh, Rahal raised his hand. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, just to follow up. So, um, was the like experimenter you were just talking about to further address how to execute a project on the knowledge gap, were you referring to someone in the bibliometrics advisor group, or was it like an independent expert mentor that you had?
Yeah, it was an independent expert mentor that I had that I reached out through like cold emailing, but I mentioned Think Neuro in like I told her that like I had experience with like reading articles and like I had experience in that specific field that like she teaches and does research in. And so when I sent that email, I was like, I have experience. I don't have experience like doing studies, but I do have experience doing this. And then like she was one of the like I think 60 people that I emailed, and she was the one that responded. We had like a conversation, we had like a coffee chat, and we ended up like yeah, like that's like she's like she was in Think Neuro, but like I used most like I think Think Neuro is like what got me it because like I didn't have any other experience to like talk about or like any other reason why I would want to do that specific research, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Let's move on to Durga.
Hi, quick question. You guys extended your research from BRMI or BRI and then applied to different conferences and poster presentations? If yes, which ones? And how did you go about extending the research that you did with Think Neuro and then submitting your abstracts to like presenting at these different conferences?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if any of the current alumni has presented at a conference external to Think Neuro, but at the orientation, there's going to be a student named Azzy who was a high school student and is currently an undergrad now, but she presented her Think Neuro research at a UPenn affiliated conference, and she's going to be talking more about that at the orientation. So please wait until the orientation in 1 week, and we can answer your question. Sandy?
Hi. First, I want to thank all of you for taking your time to be here today and sharing us your experiences. I have a total of two questions. First, my
Sure.
question is specifically about like time management. With all the high school stress going on, how did you guys manage to manage your time with the BR internship as well as your other extracurriculars? And second, to those who have email professors, what specifically did you mention in your email that managed to land you an opportunity? For example, like, did you guys ask to collaborate on current research?
Yeah, so let's start with the time management question. Does anybody have any tips or suggestions?
I can maybe answer that question. I think for time management in general throughout high school, I know it's really cliche, but I think something that's really important, especially if you're involved in other extracurriculars outside of school and maybe have a lot of or a heavy academic course load, I would really recommend using Google Calendar. I know I use Google Calendar to even remind myself of this meeting, but I think it's really helpful, especially maybe if you have like a lot of meetings or commitments outside of school, and also just to stay like on top of your courses at school. And I think in general, it also really helps if you're choosing classes at school that you're actually passionate about or really care about because at least in my experience, I find that I procrastinate a lot less when I'm doing my STEM classes because I'm actually interested in those, maybe over like other humanities courses. So make sure you're picking not only classes, but also extracurriculars and activities that you actually care about and would devote, a lot of your time to. And then I think you also asked like the how did I manage Think Neuro, the internship with my other extracurriculars? I think I found like from my experience, where I think communication is key is kind of like the message I want to bring out of this is there were some times where I found like maybe when a deadline that I had approaching for my internship at Think Neuro conflicted with something else or maybe like an emergency happened. I did talk to my co-associate multiple times and really like communicated that with her. And something that's really great about Think Neuro too is I feel like the co-associates are always super sweet, and they're really understanding. So they do understand when, maybe emergencies, life happens, so they do understand. But just remember to communicate and like don't ghost your co-associate or like ghost your other members in your group. Just remember to always communicate, and if a conflict does happen, then you should be okay.
Nice. Okay, I think her second question was how did you find the like what did you include in the outreach email to the professors to get the external research opportunity? So like what did you talk about in the networking email? Does anybody want to answer that?
I can answer that. So basically, what I said in the email was I mentioned R and I mentioned Web of Science. I also sent we made an abstract and we did a research poster. That research poster, so I just attached it. I also had like my resume with like a full description of like what exact like research question that I had in that project. And I think like specifically what I asked for, like I did research on like this is like pretty common advice, but like I did research on exactly what research she was doing at the moment. I read through like most of her papers, like the abstracts of most of her papers, and then using that, I was like, this is very similar to what I wanted to do in my AP research project. And then I explained what the role of an expert advisor is in AP research, and I was like, I'm looking for someone to be that, and I'm also like I wanted to ask if like I could collaborate with you or do an independent study. Then I also asked her if she wanted to like meet either in person or online because she lives in the Westwood area in LA and I go to school like very near there. So I was like I can like either come to UCLA or like something like that. And then I basically had that coffee chat with her and then kind of convinced her to like let me do the independent study because it would be a cool opportunity. And they had like excessive funding for like a previous project that they were doing. And so that's like kind of what the process was like to get the independent study.
Yeah.
If that, yeah, I think that was the question.
Nice. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so the next question, we're going to move on to a different person. So I know Rahal is raising his hand, but I do want to get through everybody else as well. Kunal, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So thank you to everyone who presented today. I really appreciate it. And I was wondering, so I'm actually not exactly looking to go into like the medical field. I'm looking to go into like data science, machine learning. So I was just wondering like how would this like internship and if this internship would like help me in the future when applying to college to try to break into like this career field, a career field outside of like the medical field.
Yeah, just to preface, ThinkNeuro has a different track called the Software Engineering Internship Experience. This one is actually new, but it's not exactly like the one exactly you're looking for, which is data science, but it is much more technical than the bibliometrics research internship. However, we do have a panelist who is a Mechie major at Stanford. Do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so basically I've done some data science machine learning stuff. I did machine learning related stuff at my research program in at Berkeley. And basically I used ThinkNeuro to help me get it just because it allowed me to like break into like the bio public health field and I was able to like connect it basically. I think it is helpful because you do learn how to like analyze different data sets, and that is a pretty useful skill to have, especially if you're trying to go into data science.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sounds good. Let's move on to Yahaya. I'm so sorry, Yahaya.
It's fine. Yeah. I was just wondering if like any of the alumni want to go to med school or like what advice do they have if people want to go to med school? And are there any other internships like people under 16 or so? And how did any of you guys go past like the price concern of like any internships or any opportunities?
I can answer this one. Um, for context, I'm prospective pre-medical student at Cornell, and I think the first part of your question was how would this experience would um like help my pre-med journey. But what I believe is that my experiences of like neuroscience research would be helpful for me specifically because I want to pursue like psychiatry or neurosurgery um fields of study. So definitely like my high school experience of studying more about neuroscience would definitely help like setting as a base knowledge for my future journey. Also, getting a research position or getting into a club at college, they might require like a like relevant past experiences of myself. In that case, that would be helpful to include my ThinkNeuro experience. And to answer the second part of the question, how can age under 16 or like younger students can participate in or pursue like research or internship? I feel like defining internship is kind of broad. Research internship, like ThinkNeuro, there are some age limits, but if you're talking about the research in general, I feel like research does not require any like age. For me, any like studying outside of school could be research. So just like discovering about your passion as general could be research. My first research was when I was 15. I did just my by myself because I was just curious about like social policies about mental health in my school. And that was stemmed like I just looked up a lot of articles from PubMed and a lot of journal websites, and my review paper started from there, without any like formal program. So I feel like to answer your question, definitely look for like internship programs that have like age limit that satisfies you. But if not, just studying outside of school could be also a research opportunity that you can take of.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much. The next question is from Kamala. Kamala, we can't hear you, so maybe try
I forgot
reconnect.
to
Oh,
disconnect my headphones. Can you guys hear me?
we can hear you now. Perfect.
First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for all your advice for college apps. It's very helpful. I was taking notes and I thought it was very assistive. And then I wanted to ask, like, what do you mean by like crafting a storyline across our common app? And then how can we kind of plan to do that when we apply?
Maybe I can answer this question. Thank you so much for the question. I think, at least in my experience, because of course everyone's common application is very different. But kind of what I mean by like crafting a storyline is kind of finding like themes within your application that you really want to emphasize. And these themes like stem from like the classes you choose to take, the extracurriculars you're involved in, the awards and honors you received, and like anything you do, like what you willingly want to spend your time in. So like for example, for me, I'm really interested in STEM and really passionate about it, but I'm also like really passionate in like equity and kind of like I guess expanding like research opportunities and access to people who may not have the same opportunities because I also come from like a Title I high school. And so what I really wanted to emphasize in my application is kind of like, yes, I'm interested in STEM and research, but I also want to be an advocate for those who may not have like similar opportunities as I did, or as other people do like around my area. And so, kind of like what I mean by crafting a story is what is each section of your application like saying? So, you can even just start by looking at like all the classes you've chosen to take so far as a high schooler. And maybe like you find out like, oh, you choose to take more STEM classes, or you choose to take more classes about this subject or this matter, and kind of like why, kind of reflecting on like again like what's your motivation for like why you want to pursue higher education, why you want to pursue college, and kind of making sure that your admissions officer can see that. And like a really good way is to, again, like what the other alumni have said, is really talk about why you decided to choose certain opportunities, activities, classes in personal statement itself, kind of clarifying, because I think a big reason why we have those essays is also kind of like, this is why I did this class, this is why I did this activity throughout high school. And this is kind of like why I'm interested in this subject matter as well, like because of my background or because of my context. And so that's kind of what I mean by telling that story, is just remembering that like you had your specific motivations for choosing what you wanted to do in high school, and it just comes down to telling the admissions officer, here's why in your application.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Let's just have two more questions before we end this session today, one from Claire and one from Rahal. So let's start with Claire.
Hello.
Hello.
I just
I just
wanted to
wanted
thank
to
you
thank
for
you.
being here and sharing your experience. And I was just wondering if you have any advice on approaching the R coding section, especially for someone who has like limited coding background.
Actually, I can answer this question. So for bibliometric analysis specifically, it is very, very beginner based. So in the past, we would hire like somebody who did like biostats or have like some extensive background in the field to help teach the curriculum. But this time around, we're going to be actually um, inviting people from Caltech CS careers to be teaching the R programming section of the internship. And so it's going to be very, I wouldn't say it's very slow. Actually, it might be the hardest part of the internship, especially because it is Caltech curriculum. But I would say utilize all the office hours. We have around 4 hours of office hour every single week. For the intensive track, there's going to be one live session every single weekend. This is exclusive to the intensive track, meaning the regular track does not have live sessions. And there's also much more office hours. Um, and so utilize all the resources we provide you, and you should be good to go. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to Rahul now.
Hi, before I start, I want to say thank you to everyone who spoke today. It really means a lot to have y'all's help and before we start the program. But just a quick follow-up. I wanted to confirm my understanding of Eldana's response to my question. So you mentioned that your external like research project was with like basically your independent research project. You approached her with like a knowledge gap and
Mhm.
kind of convinced her to um I guess collaborate with you. But at your time during the period in which you were doing the internship with Think Neuro, the the task at hand, or rather the thing you presented at this symposium was kind of presenting the knowledge gap and doing like a lit review slash analysis of like the landscape of the field, right?
Yeah, it was. So
Okay.
like it wasn't really like at all similar to like the independent study that I did with the UCLA professor, because that was more like I did two training courses. I also sent that like in the chat, like the two training courses that I did was around like euthanasia and like how to work with mice in labs like ethically. But like in reality, a minor can't like be handling like species like that. So most of like the euthanasia was done by like my principal investigator in that lab that I was working with, and that was a graduate student that the professor connected me to that works in her lab. And then all of the rest of the things like designing the study, that was what I like pitched to her when we met in person. And then like everything else, like the like analyzing the ELISA kit. The ELISA kit is like basically like what you the cortisol, like all of the things that you measure afterwards. That's what I took, and that's the data analysis that I did. So it's kind of like not similar to like what you do in the Think Near Bibliometrics internship, because that's more of like looking at the articles, looking at trends, etc., like you said. but it certainly helps because like I wouldn't know anything about the field, and I also wouldn't know like how to approach someone and be like, I have an interest in neuroscience. Like I could just be like, yeah, I like brains, but like not have anything to back that up. But by having like experience doing research and having a research poster about like that specific topic that she's doing research on and like proposing it after saying all of that, it's more helpful.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. So that concludes the alumni panel. So if you have any more questions, feel free to ask them directly in the Slack in the alumni panel channel specifically. Our panelists will stay on for one more hour. So if you have any last minute questions, please ask there. Um, but but yeah, the panel is over. You guys are free to go. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night. Thank you guys. Bye.